Back here this Saturday morning, Steve Cashel, Dr. Brian Cole. It is Sports Medicine Weekly. Net proceeds from our show, Sports Medicine Weekly, go to support orthopedic research at Rush through the LiveActiveNow.org fund. Our producer, board operator, Shane Reardon. Coordinating producer is Teresa Ann Seeger. Dr. Cole, let's get into some of the research and clinical trials that you guys are undergoing at Midwest Orthopedics at Rush. Common practice, huh?
Yeah, Steve, we're in a very good environment. That's one of the greatest advantages of the symbiotic relationship we have with Rush, because it's an academic institution and we're an academic but private orthopedic practice. Yet, given the patient base we have, we see lots of very challenging problems. So we've been very fortunate that we have participated in a number of FDA trials. It's interesting when a new product or a new biologic solution comes in, say, to treat cartilage problems, which is one of our areas of interest in addition to rotator cuff healing. It has to go under very rigorous investigation. It's usually a series of 3 different trials. The price tag for these companies to get these things to market can be between $30 and $60 million, and it can take more than 10 years. And the most important part is actually finding the proper patients. They're not always the same patients that walk into our office. They're a very unique group of patients that have a very specific problem, so they're kind of hard to find. But when we do, we're in an environment that we have the opportunity to use treatments that otherwise wouldn't be available to treat very, very difficult problems. And in this case, with some of the current clinical trials, such as our Aesculap trial, which is otherwise known as Novacart 3D, we can actually treat cartilage defects that can otherwise potentially develop into arthritis later on in life. So a really unique solution to treat very difficult problems.
So this new technique, from what I understand, Dr. Cole, replaces plastic, metal, or foreign tissue parts, and really kind of an interesting transplant using their own cells, right?
Yeah, so what we do is we actually will take a sample. We'll use the arthroscopy equipment, which is when we look inside the joint using a small camera. We'll take a very small sample of cartilage, send it to a laboratory. They'll then grow the cartilage cells on a membrane, and then we come back through a very small incision, say 4 to 6 weeks later, and implant a sheet of this membrane that has the cartilage cells embedded in it, and literally just lay it on top of the cartilage defect. So there'll be exposed bone, but we lay this sheet on top of the defect. It integrates with the surrounding cartilage and infuses with the bone to create a brand new surface of articular or cartilage, the white, glistening, smooth substance at the end of our bones.
That's neat stuff.
It's pretty cool.
It really
is.
It's
like science fiction.
Yeah, that's where we're going, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, designed to restore damaged knee cartilage, the Aesculap Novacart 3D study. Let's bring on our next guest here, Dr. Cole. This is Chris Zlevor. He is a test subject from Wisconsin and an Aesculap patient. Chris, thanks so much for joining us here on this Saturday morning on Sports Medicine Weekly. So take us through what your injury was and your decision to go through the Aesculap Novacart 3D study.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Appreciate you inviting me on the show. So for this, it was a basketball-related injury, just playing pickup at the local rec. Came down a little funky on my knee, and actually when it first happened, I thought it was the ACL, and definitely an issue. But through the whole process, got a referral from a local doctor, and they were going to do a microfracture surgery. And then actually started Googling doctors in the Midwest here and came across Dr. Cole. And next thing you know, I was enrolled in the study.
Let me ask you a question. When you first came in, you had not yet had a microfracture surgery, which for the audience is a very common procedure done in professional athletes where we'll poke small holes in the bone to take advantage of your own body's intrinsic ability to heal. So you had not had that procedure, correct?
No, I did not have microfracture surgery. I did, however, have 2 prior ACL injuries, one on the left and one on the right. So knee surgeries are, I'd say, not new for me at my young age here. But
and what were your symptoms? What were the problems you were having?
Clicking in the knee was the main thing. Locking along with that really inhibited me to even climb up a set of stairs after it first happened.
Because of pain?
Yeah, because of pain, swelling. Sports and athletics were pretty much out of the question. After the incident.
Busy with Chris Zlevor he's a test subject from Wisconsin, an Aesculap patient. Aesculap is their new Novacart 3D study designed to restore damaged knee cartilage. I'm Steve Cashel with Dr. Brian Cole. So when was this again, Chris? When did you start the study?
Oh, it had to be 3 years ago today, so sometime in 2015, October of 2015, I think is when the surgery occurred.
Wow.
So what's interesting is this is a study that it's a randomized study, right? So you knew that you could get either microfracture or go into the study arm, right?
Yeah, it was. I was aware up front of that. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm just curious. Obviously you have you place a lot of trust and confidence in the system, and both are viable options. In other words, a microfracture still is a good surgery as long as it's done well technically and the rehab is done properly. But what was it like for you to go? I always find it fascinating patients who are willing to go into an experimental trial. Knowing that some of the safety has already been investigated and we know it's a safe decision, but it's got to be a little bit unnerving to go into a clinical trial. There's just some unknown there. What was that like for you?
I mean, there is a certain stigmatism, I guess, with it. You see some of the stuff on TV, and it's not always the brightest. But I can tell you, I had full trust in Dr. Cole's abilities in the situation, and whether I was in the test group, the microfracture, or the Novacart 3D, I felt confident in the result.
Let me ask Dr. Cole, all right, so how do you learn about what Aesculap is doing? Do they approach Midwest Orthopedics at Rush? They're doing these clinical studies, I'm sure, over the country, maybe the world. Was started in Germany.
Yeah. Yes.
And do they approach you guys then? Take us back to how you first learned about it. How many years ago was it?
This is probably, we've been involved for 5 years. I mean,
okay.
It's fascinating when you look through, so, not to get in too much detail, but let's just say there's a new technology trying to get to market. The FDA oversees all new drugs, new technologies such as this, right? So it's really like a drug trial. It's a formal trial. And it requires, generally hundreds of patients to properly power the study to make the study statistically relevant. You have to have, typically it's up to 300 patients or sometimes even more. And this is also a randomized study, which makes it very difficult. So it's a surgical trial, and patients, say generally half the patients will get the experimental group, which is the cells that are biopsied and cultured and so forth, and half gets a standard microfracture technique. So we're required to compare to something we're already doing. And to do this requires a virtual army to set up a clinical trial. So we have a whole clinical trials division, probably 20 people that interface just to get a clinical trial like this up and going. And, we actually have about 10 trials going on like this. Many of them are in the cartilage realm, and some of them are in the shoulder realm for rotator cuff repair and things of that nature, as well as shoulder replacement and, and ACL reconstruction and using stem cells and so forth. So I will tell you that the best part, one of the greatest parts about my job is I'm not just seeing patients in the office and doing traditional surgeries, but we really have the opportunity to be on the cutting edge. This technique, for example, will potentially replace existing technologies that are very unpredictable. And it takes a devastating condition. Like, he's too young to undergo a knee replacement. He doesn't have enough arthritis to require a knee replacement, yet he's sufficiently symptomatic that there was no other solution really available to him, and he couldn't play sports, had trouble going up and downstairs, knees clicking, it's swelling, it's painful. What are you going to do? And there's not a ton of options, and this is a opportunity to actually get access to treatment that he otherwise would never have access to because it's in a clinical trial phase.
And you've seen the success, obviously, from this, which is really neat.
Yeah, so the good thing about this particular technology is that there's a track record in Europe. So the European regulatory pathway to get a product to market is very different than ours. So that's why we see a lot of patients in the United States who leave the United States to go for treatment. And you have to be very careful about choosing that pathway. The FDA is there for a reason, but there have been thousands of patients already implanted, so there's a security there knowing that the technology works. But it has to be studied formally in the United States to get it through the pathway to deliver it to patients.
Again, we're talking with one of the test subjects. The Aesculap patient is Chris Zlevor from Wisconsin. And Chris, tell us now how you feel. 3 years after, and is it as good as you thought it was going to be?
I could tell you going into it, my first thought was, hey, maybe I won't be able to play athletics, but I'll be able to, normal bodily functions here. And sitting down with Dr. Cole, the goal was to get me back to athletics, and that's exactly what he did. I'm back in the intramural basketball league. I, do CrossFit a couple times a week. I would say I'm, if anything, above where I was when I went in. So nothing but smiles over here for me.
Neat stuff. I want to ask Dr. Cole another follow-up to that. Chris took advantage of the study and very successful. He's doing perfect, as he says. Dr. Cole, for those listening to us out there, you kind of set the parameters, of the typical patient that might go through the Aesculap Novacart 3D study. How do our listeners get involved if they're interested in the study?
I think the best way to do that, Steve, would be to go to the Novacart 3D study page, and that's www.clinicaltrials.gov. www.clinicaltrials.gov. Now, we're one site of many. There might be 25, 30 sites around the country, and all of our listeners, we have a national show basically, so our listeners could be virtually anywhere. And on that website, clinicaltrials.gov, they can find the different locations near them. But if they're in the Midwest, we're one of the study sites at Rush, and my partners, Nick Verma, Adam Yankee, Brian Forsyth, and myself are involved in enrolling our patients in this study at Midwest Orthopedics at Rush.
That's what they look for, Midwest Orthopedics at Rush, Rush University Medical Center?
I would say www.rushortho.com, and they can find a number of clinical trials through our website as well.
That's neat. What's the youngest patient you could work on in this?
Well, these studies, there are regulatory and ethical issues. So generally speaking, most of these studies are for 18 to, say, 55 or 60, and patients cannot have arthritis, bone-on-bone arthritis. These are localized cartilage defects. So if a patient's been told they're a candidate for knee replacement due to the extensive arthritis, they are not candidates for this study.
All right, Chris, great stuff. Really appreciate you joining us and sharing your experience about the Aesculap Novacart 3D study.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on. All
righty. We're back with our next topic will be the emotional impact of injuries. We're going to visit with Tara Hackney from Athletico. Interesting stuff. I know Dr. Cole goes through this every day with his patients as well. So stay with us. It's Sports Medicine Weekly, only on
670 The Score.